Greetings from the southernmost island of the Marianas, Guini Giza Guahan. Guahu si Rita Pangolina Nauta, Familia Galaidi, Diaz, Sablons, and Klotla, Guini Giza Guahans and Saipan. Those are my clan names that extend between Guam and Saipan, and I also serve as the managing director of Guampedia.com. Antes de para Tuhuani programa, before we start our program, para Famaisin y Asaina, Zani Antin y Manmofotna, Guini y Islas Marianas, para madbendicihe todos, ni mandanya paku. Asaina, Manyaina, Inaham, Pulanham, Tatsalaniham Motna, Asaina Maasi. In our island traditions of chant or prayer, I just ask for a blessing for all of us who are gathered here. Sizu'us Ma'asi for joining Guampedia's session of our 2021 Culture of Connecting virtual outreach series focused on teaching Micronesia students. Guampedia's existence is based on the belief that the future of our islands is dependent upon an informed, educated citizenry. Scarce resources result in limited opportunities to learn and understand about our island's unique history, culture, environment, and present-day society. Guampedia exists to provide a comprehensive, accessible resource about our islands that will educate the global community and increase opportunities for the enlightenment of our people, allowing us to chart our destiny. Since its inception, Guampedia truly has been a community-based project to provide an important educational and informational resource with primary objectives revolving around preservation, access, and education. We've grown over the past 13 years online, being a nonprofit affiliate of the University of Guam and through operational funding support by the government of Guam. We currently have more than 1,200 written entries, 3,800 images, 98 videos, and 300 e-publications and counting. With the support of community organizations and institutions, and more than 150 people to date, from academic and traditional scholars and writers to local artisans and cultural producers. We continue to support and promote community and regional historical and cultural preservation efforts. This is part of Guampedia's continued service and commitment to the government of Guam and the community at large in this ongoing public-private partnership. Since 2014, our visitor stats have been consistent at 25 to 30,000 unique visits per month. We continue working to expand Guampedia's global reach through social media platforms and a monthly e-newsletter highlighting relevant historiography and island wisdom. Last year, in response to this global pandemic, we implemented this virtual community outreach program series. Last year's Culture of Connecting series focused on bridging the gap between younger generations to Guam's past and how the past experiences of our World War II Manyaina could help to navigate some of the challenges the pandemic brought on, providing connections and relevance to our island's history and cultural heritage into navigating emerging new realities. Although our initial efforts have been focused on Guam's history and cultural heritage of the Marianas, since Guam hosted the 12th Festival of Pacific Arts, we have been expanding our content into greater Micronesia with our People of Pacific Cultures or pop cultures, and then more recently with our Micronesia Milestones timeline and the creation of the Micronesia Milestones portal. All of these efforts are driven by the mounting evidence of the positive impacts of utilizing culturally relevant pedagogy in the classrooms, especially for Indigenous students. It is definitely a work in progress, and it is our hope to connect our region through our vast history and enduring cultural heritage to provide regional and culturally relevant resources for Micronesia students and Micronesians studying abroad. It is also our hope that you find today's program informative and helpful in your teaching and learning efforts. We are honored to feature our Guampedia team member and ULG graduate in Sociology and Chamorro Studies, Lazaro Canata. And following Lazaro will be Dr. David Sanchez, assistant professor in the University of Pittsburgh Civil and Environmental Engineering Department. And he also serves as the assistant director for the Mascaro Center for Sustainable Innovation. To begin our program this afternoon, it is my honor to introduce UOG Senior Vice President and Provost, Dr. Anita Borja Enriquez. She served on Guampedia's board of directors for more than a decade and as president for the past few years. Dr. Anita has served the University of Guam for more than 25 years and has always been a strong cultural advocate and supporter. A daughter of Guahan, we also feature her personal reflection in Guampedia's Women in Guam History book, sharing her mother's story, the woman who inspired her and instilled in her the cultural value of Inadahi. Dr. Anita?
Masi Rita. On behalf of the University of Guam and program affiliate Guampedia, Buenas and Hafa welcome Jen Sizus Maasi for joining us in this virtual outreach program session, Culture of Connecting, focused on island wisdom and the Micronesia context. Within our unique spaces, ordinary people reaching out and coming together for a cause and a passion to make good for the sake of advancing others will yield extraordinary results. Having a homegrown grassroots perspective, I drew from the strength of my mother and our extended family system. A World War II survivor, my mother was a woman of faith and resiliency. What resonated most about her and other elders in our family system was their altruistic spirit, exuding a strong culture of care, or as we say in Samoro, inadahi. This cultural value instilled a strong sense of belonging, and that my siblings and first cousins were chetlus, or brothers and sisters. In this context, absent of gender distinction, no one was better than the other, and we had to take care of each other. It is also important to note in the Samoro culture, before Western influences, men and women were equally valued, and each played significant roles to ensuring the well-being of their clans. These concepts of Chetlu and Inadahi are central to our cultural heritage as reflected in our ancient Chamorro creation story. In the Marianas and throughout Greater Micronesia, we are small communities where island wisdom is framed with a way of knowing and a way of doing. This Inadahi spirit comes with an understanding of our island's histories and that of our indigenous cultures. Especially from here in our region, we need to draw from our deep and collective knowledge, as noted by Master Navigator Larry Regatal on Micronesia's seafaring tradition, that sustainability is rooted in our ancient wisdom. With scarce resources and the interconnectedness of our island's ecosystems, this culture of care has helped to sustain our communities for thousands of years. Within this nurturing culture of connecting, we're moved to bridge divides, to share and collaborate, to work collectively, to give back and bring balance. This has to be the common thread in our collective community role in education to achieving a sustainable future for our islands and planet. The spirit of Inadahi is perhaps what has inspired my work at the university for the past 25 years. This sense of purpose, delivering value, and making a difference socially and economically throughout our region lends itself to that Inadahi spirit. That is necessary to make meaningful impact. And I've been immensely impressed with and inspired by my colleagues who have exemplified this past and present. In viewing the role of the university in our region, we have an opportunity to build unique capacity to engage in scholarly work and solutions that are centered on island wisdom, to augment our efforts in natural resources management, entrepreneurial innovations, improved social systems, and place-based economic development. Through our programs and scholarly research, we can learn from the unique diversity and abundance of indigenous knowledge and practices in our region. In doing so, we can produce intellectual infrastructure with place-based knowledge that honor, acknowledge, and take responsibility to perpetuate indigenous wisdom. Here in the Marianas and throughout Greater Micronesia, our cultural values of care, or Inadahi, our integrate systems of reciprocity, or Tsinsuli, and our central tenet of restoring balance and harmony when things aren't right or Inafat Malik, are not just key aspects of sustainability, it's also part of who we are as island people. It's with this cultural framework that I've charted the course for the university sustainability initiatives rooted in island wisdom and cultivating a culture of connecting locally and globally. Today's program is both a reflection of that and a result. Since 2009, the University of Guam partnered with Guampedia to support this community-based project to educate and enlighten our local and global community about our rich history and cultural heritage with an islander-centered perspective. Throughout his educational journey, Lazaro Quinata has been utilizing Guampedia as a resource. He went on to join the Guampedia team during his senior year here at the university. And since graduating in 2020, at the onset of this global pandemic, he also returned to the classroom, this time as an educator in Guam studies. He's since been and continues to be a contributor to the growing body of knowledge of islander-centered historiography. And in his most recent work and endeavor with Dr. Kirk Johnson, he is now advocating for teaching higher education in the Micronesian context. Like Lazaro, Dr. David Sanchez is another scholar and educator from Micronesia and rooted in the Marianas. He, like many from our region, have gone beyond our waters into educational institutions all over the globe. In the course of navigating the university's role as a land-grant institution and recognizing the rich network of Indigenous scholars and educators within the Micronesian diaspora several years ago, in collaboration with Guampedia, UOG's Global Learning and Engagement Division, and the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, we launched our Mailatati program. We reached out and invited scholars and educators such as Dr. Sanchez to cultivate a connection with the university and engage in organic ways that are not only mutually beneficial to our respective institutions and their enrichment of our students, but will benefit and support the region we serve. Dr. Sanchez responded to our invitation to Mailatati in so many different levels. He's graciously offered his assistance to our committee in developing UOG sustainability programs, engaging with faculty across the campus from different disciplines, and pioneering University of Pittsburgh's first Study Away program in Micronesia, Sustainability of Island Nations, Guam, bringing with him 10 undergraduate students of engineering. Even in the midst of this global pandemic, they are in their second week of their 14-day field program with student groups developing sustainable design ideas for Guam in the areas of energy, water, buildings, and indigenous medicinal plants through engagement with local stakeholders, programs, and initiatives. And of course, we are grateful for his willingness to share with us today his perspective on the value of our region's indigenous island wisdom. This global pandemic has changed the course of humankind at so many levels. The isolation that we all experience in one way or another has truly helped us, willingly or unwillingly, to look from within. Like our ancestors who came before us, it is our responsibility to rethink who we are in terms of our cultural values and utilize them to address challenges and collectively advance the quality of life within our ecosystems. Let's connect through partnerships, listen with respect, adapt where necessary, and sustain best practices. Building the capacity of our community within our unique spaces, whether as members of an academic, business, government, or social enterprise, is also a great strategy to shift mindsets back to a truly interconnected community that exudes a culture of connecting, a culture of care that will yield extraordinary results towards regional and global sustainability. Sandanklan Asjusmaasi to all of you for joining us, and to our two presenters, Lazaro Quinata and Dr. David Sanchez.
So Lazaro Quinata, of course, graduated from the University of Guam with a major in sociology and minor in Chamorro studies in 2020. He officially joined the Guampedia team as media production and research assistant in 2018 and then became program coordinator since 2020. Kanata has represented Guam at the National History Day competition for the majority of his middle and high school career, garnering third place nationwide in 2015. Lazaro has also been an active advocate for the practice and preservation of Chamorro culture. He has worked closely with the Guam Preservation Trust, Kumata Community Foundation, and University of Guam's Chamorro Club, Manyatlun Marianas, on a variety of projects and events aimed at the promotion of the culture of on the island. Ladies and gentlemen, Lazaro Kanata.
Day. Let me go ahead and change slides. Okay, so my name is Lazaro Kanata again. We can just skip the introduction. And I'm going to be presenting a paper that I did together with Dr. Kirk Johnson, who is the professor of sociology at the University of Guam and the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences on island-centered pedagogy, teaching higher education in the Micronesian context. So just a little bit of background for this. I was asked to do a presentation along with Dr. Johnson back in 2020, so just last year, at the University of Guam Faculty Development Day on teaching within the Micronesian context. And one of the big factors that led to us deciding on doing this presentation was when looking at the the demographics of the students at the University of Guam, we found that Asian Pacific Islanders make up an overwhelming majority of the students there. And we also found it interesting that even though they made up the majority of the students there, we didn't see an island-centered pedagogy reflective of their cultural background as we didn't see it as much as you would expect to see from a place that has over 95% of this population in this demographic. So upon doing the presentation at UOG's Faculty Development Day, we were then encouraged by members of the UOG staff to take this and bring it to the next level through an academic paper, which I'll be sharing with you some of the results. Okay, so the path of higher education is often a long and arduous journey. Throughout their years at university, students are placed under the rigorous demands of academic research and writing. Their mental abilities are constantly tested through application of critical thinking and comprehension as they contextualize dense course material into a myriad of assignments, essays, and presentations. This rigor, coupled with other complications, leads to as much as 40% of undergraduate students across the nation to never complete their degree programs. Despite these challenges, students within the Micronesian communities find themselves with additional trials as they embark on the same path. In their pursuit of knowledge through higher education, Micronesian students find themselves in the midst of a balancing act between upholding the values of their culture and meeting the expectations and demands of Western education. Throughout their childhood, islanders are raised by their families with a set of cultural norms that shape and inform every aspect of life, from social interactions to one's aspirations and life priorities. While the adherence to such norms is no cause for concern in daily life, they do pose key problems when set against the conflicting norms found in an environment structured according to the norms and expectations of Western-styled higher education. It is this tension that allows an internal struggle to be formed within students as they seek both to maintain the integrity of their culture and yet excel in the competitive academic environment. In this presentation, we will discuss 4 essential concepts educators of Micronesian students might consider as they endeavor to develop a culturally relevant curriculum. Those 4 are cultivating a collectivist mindset, understanding cultural expressions, relating lessons to local issues, and empathizing with students' personal responsibilities, which just so happens to form like an acronym CURE. Going on to our first one, which is cultivating a collectivist mindset. Oh, so looking at these 4, we've looked at the broad literature that surrounds island-centered pedagogy. And from this, we found 4 key areas, and these 4 are reflected here, that we feel are important aspects that must be considered when creating this pedagogy. These aren't the only 4 that we think you might need when developing this kind of pedagogy, but this is a really good starting point. And also not to say that these 4 can't be applied into non-Pacific Island classrooms. We think that these four are just different ways to look at education that just so happen to be informed by island wisdom that we find around our communities. Okay, so the first one, which is cultivating this collectivist mindset, a foundational concept in Micronesian cultures, and one that is so important when considering culturally relevant course curriculums, is the concept of collectivism. And it's articulated through all of these specific islands in very unique ways, with tomorrow being Inafat Maulik. So Inafat Maulik is literally translated as the making of things good. And it's a philosophy that encompasses numerous different cultural values, all speaking to the sense of interdependence. Um, it's a spirit of cooperation among people. And the concept of an Maulik is a powerful concern for mutuality rather than individualism, which we see in a lot of Western, in the Western setting. Um, Many people on Guam and throughout Micronesia and the Pacific grow up with this focus on the collective. And it becomes a big shock when they're met with the inherent individuality of Western education. So the key difference that we see between individualism and collectivism comes in the way each understands their relationship to the group. So whereas an individualistic mindset values uniqueness and views the group as like a voluntary relationship, wherein each member joins a group as a means of achieving a personal goal and the desires of the individual, the collectivist mindset is defined by the relation to the group and within the group. In this mindset, the group is a mandatory priority whose successes take precedence over that of any single member. In this sense, the actions of the individual are constantly perceived by their effect on the other members of the group. The individualist mindset is not something that is straightforward and is told formally within the classroom, but it's something that just comes as a result of the Western style of education. An example of this is looking at the assigning of letter grades and percentages within the class. So in this setup, each individual student is given a grade that reflects their personal progress and rank in class. And although this method is not inherently detrimental, it does, however, perpetuate a sense of competition and individualism in students. For students that value success in the class, this arrangement places their success, their individual success, over that of anyone else in the class. And it's further magnified in higher education, where students are now competing at higher levels of intensity for achievements that can set them apart from their peers. In this environment, students find themselves hesitant to share notes and supplemental materials as it could give their competition an advantage against them. And this is observed in higher education courses throughout the nation and also in other nations abroad. In one study that we looked at in Canada in the nursing program, we found that students there were a lot more isolated in their study because they felt that if they were to share any information with their classmates, it could be a detriment for them. They might not be able to make it to pass the class or be in the upper percentage. And so what we see is this like inherent sense of competition just taking root. And although the grading system is a mainstay, we don't want to do away with the grading scale entirely. So highlighting that this is an important factor in creating this individualistic mindset. We don't want to do away with it entirely. In fact, we think that there are a number of measures that can be implemented into the classroom to ensure that proper care is given to students to this collectivist nature of the demographic. So rather than celebrating the individual achievements of students who scored higher marks on exams, an alternative approach that rewards complete advancement as a class to a new lesson can be adopted. So not just saying like these kids achieved 100% or got an A, and so we're going to celebrate them. Rather, flipping the dialogue and just saying that the entire class has progressed. This small change in narrative helps to empower all students of the class, not just those that did well. It acts to encourage those that aren't doing so well and creates this community within the classroom. What we do when we allow for collectivism to really take hold within the classroom is we see that a lot of our students are pulling upon their own cultural understandings and their own cultural experiences of teamwork. This creates an environment that encourages students to not only ask each other for help in class, but to seek each other outside of the class. And this reverberates into after the course is done, they can also assist each other as they go throughout their entire degree programs and into their professional fields as well. And so this idea of competition as being a purely detrimental thing it's not the case. It's just the fact that when we take it to the next level and allow for individualism and the detriment of others as the means by which we determine our own success is what causes that big disconnect culturally. The next thing we have is understanding cultural expressions. So as we look into the value system and beliefs of cultures from around the world, many similarities can be observed. And these similarities are indicators of core human values that are necessary for the survival of our collective species. So that being said, cultures are not unique because of their stark differences in values, but rather they are unique in the ways in which those values are practiced. And this can be understood in how different cultures view and value the idea of like family. So within American culture, the family unit is identified typically as the nuclear family, consisting of parents and their children. And this differs from the Chamorro culture, where family units include grandparents, uncles, aunties, cousins, third cousins, ninas, ninos, everyone. And in this observation, both cultures contain the value of family, but view them in unique and different ways. And so this simple difference is what constitutes in this simple difference in what constitutes a family unit extends to most aspects of life and culture itself. So just looking at this idea and this example of family can be expanded to nearly every value held within both the Western culture and the cultures we find within our own islands. It's this difference in cultural understanding that often leads to a significant disconnect in the classroom when teachers or professors come from cultural environments and backgrounds that are more rooted in the West than students from cultures of Micronesia. So this can come in the form of how students behave themselves within the classroom. A common thing that we notice amongst people from the Pacific Islands is this great reverence for elders. Yeah, this great reverence for elders. So upon like within your own family unit, whenever an elder says to do a task or has an idea or an objective to achieve, you as the younger person usually concede whatever arguments you have or whatever reservations you have in order to get that done. Even if it's not the right way or you think that there's an easier way, there's just that respect for elders that keeps us from openly disagreeing with them. And this is then taken by students within the Micronesian context into the classroom as well. When a professor has, a stance or a idea that is so counter to the Chamorro culture, it's so counter to the student's beliefs, the student, respecting the authority of the advisor or of the professor, chooses not to bring up any discussion. And what this does is it really just detriments the entire class because it doesn't allow for true learning to take place. So rather than just getting rid of that, also, teachers should find that at the beginning of class, they should explicitly state expectations for the class, saying that within this space, it's encouraged to disagree. It's encouraged to disagree with elders, whether it be the professor or whether it be classmates themselves. So understanding the difference in cultural expression should be taken into just as much consideration as factors like socioeconomic status or learning disability when implementing teaching methods throughout the course. Acknowledging this difference enables more genuine communication to flourish between teachers and their students. In this relationship, the student becomes an active participant in their education and is empowered with the ability to inform their teacher about cultural differences that may often go unnoticed. This allows for students to think more critically about their culture and the outward effects it has on other areas of their life. In addition, it provides the teacher with a new source of specialized feedback that can help them as they continually adapt their lesson plans to more adequately support the needs of their students on their educational journey. So a big thing that we always want to push when looking at island-centered pedagogy is not that it's the teacher bending over backwards for the student, but it's also allowing an environment for the students to give the right feedback to the professor or the teacher so that they can also adjust themselves as they teach within this new context. Because whether you're teaching students from Guam or students from the States or students from another country, there are bound to be cultural differences that need to be addressed and they need to be understood and acknowledged within the classroom. So what this does in taking this first step really allows for a better flow of communication between teachers and students so that way all can progress collectively through the course material. The next thing we have is relating lessons to local issues. So a common problem faced by teachers is this lack of engagement from students in the class. And while the explanations for this can span from like layout of the classroom to the subject being taught, the root that we find of most indifference stems from the inability of the student to connect what is being taught to their own lived realities. Educators are challenged to help students to see and understand the relationship between the concepts they are learning in the classroom and the environment in which they live, whether it be cultural, geographical, political, social, economic, or even spiritual. The mixing of lessons and applications are usually made through real world examples. So rather than just learning about key terms and theories behind topics like biodiversity, applying these concepts to places that we know and see can give lessons a new weight. And this is done in hope that students will find the material meaningful, useful, and practical, in turn making them more excited about education. So we normally see this when discussing, something like what we said with biodiversity. You would use like a case study, like Yosemite Park or the Grand Canyon, or marshland in Florida as an example for students to relate to the course material. However, in Pacific Islands, this engagement can continue to persist amidst the use of these world examples. And this is because even the examples employed in the course are so divorced from the lived realities of the students being taught. So while using examples from other countries or other groups of people to contextualize the lesson, they fall on deaf ears to students in Pacific Islands who really have no context to fully grasp the realities of those situations. This idea of viewing the problems of Pacific peoples as less significant those of larger nations finds its roots in the stereotypes of the ignoble savage propagated by early European explorers. So we see this and we tend to think that when we use examples that aren't from the local nation, or from the local community or the local environment, we tend to give this unfair bias that these local communities don't have problems that are as significant or as important as those experienced in the global scene or in larger nations, right? And we can find roots of this going back to just how island communities are written about by early explorers. Early explorers wrote the islands as being like ignoble savages, meaning that the islands are inherently these centers for harmony and peace. And while that is a really nice compliment, it doesn't paint a good picture of what the actual environment is. Like although the islands are different in the way that they do things, they also have problems that are just as pressing and just as important. For many local communities, issues like widespread poverty, an increase in health complications of Native peoples, and a host of climate change related problems are just as pressing as any other issue. Due to the focus on interdependence with one another and nature, many courses within the University of Guam utilize place-based resources to assist in teaching these key lessons. So throughout the University of Guam, because it's an island, because the university sits on this island, they really take advantage of the place that they have. In these photos here, these are both photos taken from the University of Guam and courses that I took. The one on the left is a sociology class, and the one on the right is a biology class. And both teachers found ways to incorporate the island's environment into the lesson itself. Within the University of Guam, another big example of this is Dr. Ann Parazatori, who utilized historic landmarks as teaching tools in her Guam history courses. As a way to encourage students to make connections between the course and the island, in 2007, Dr. Tori initiated a service learning project that would donate 1,000 service hours to various local organizations. And one of that was the historic district of Inalahan. So what was really interesting is that upon assigning this service project to the students, huge levels of appreciation for Guam's history was observed by Dr. Tori and the students themselves. So not only were the students reading about the Spanish influence in architecture, but they were able to see it in the historic homes in Alahan. They were also able to speak with members of the community, elders, who talked about their experiences during World War II or the decades right after the war. And this once again gave weight to the course being taught. What we find is that rather than doing away with the use of larger scale examples altogether, examples used in class should strive to contain elements that connect the lessons with the environment. So while it's understood that the use of global examples are important for students to learn about other places and ways of living, educators must also learn to incorporate examples that help students connect in meaningful and realistic ways. This can build students' abilities to widen their worldview and strengthen their critical thinking abilities by helping them to see the connection between global issues and their unique geographical situations. Another example that we were able to see through research was that of Australia. So there are a few Australian universities that are required to form these strong bonds with local organizations. And what this does, this existing relationship between the world of academia in Australia and then the nonprofit organizations is that these nonprofit organizations are able to rely on the help of students and the information and knowledge of faculty members in order to create solutions to the problems that affect them specifically. So we see that the university is not just used as a place that pumps out students with degrees, but also actively serves as a means of contributing to the overall community. The last one we have is empathizing with students' personal responsibilities. And this is one that is most important for teachers to understand and strive to appreciate. As students progress up the hierarchy of schooling, courses become more rigorous and expectations more demanding. It is here that many Pacific Island students find the most resistance to the advancement of their own education. Students have made it this far through higher education have proved that they do possess the ability necessary to engage in such advanced learning. However, they face a significant problem when completion of the course comes at the detriment of cultural obligations. And we've all seen this and we've all experienced this, whether it be within the school setting or whether it's within our work. We find that our family obligations often conflict with that of our professional or academic careers. And we have to understand that within just looking at the student population, that this conflict and obligation doesn't mean that students don't look at their education as a high priority item. In fact, it's so high priority for them that even though they have family obligations, they still try to make that, their own education happen, right? Many students at the University of Guam partially, and in some cases entirely, fund their whole education outside of parental assistance, because for them, the idea of achieving an undergraduate degree is a worthwhile endeavor. And it's because they hold on to these two parts of their lives, family and education, as top priorities, that they undergo a significant amount of stress when both of these compete for time and attention. So over the course of this, Dr. Johnson even shared with us that he had a similar problem or a similar situation within his own classes when he first started teaching at the University of Guam. He had a student that would say that they couldn't make it to a class or couldn't turn in an assignment because they had a family rosary to attend. And him thinking like it was a one-time thing, said it was okay. And then literally the next week, they said they have a rosary again. And he started to think that maybe it was an excuse that a student was using in order to just not turn in their work. But again, it was through forming that communication, that open communication with the students, that he was able to understand that when it's a death in the family, like that takes precedence over pretty much every other aspect of their life. And upon hearing this and understanding the reasoning behind using this or having this, he started to exercise more compassion with his students, right? So rather than forcing students to choose between the priorities of their culture and a complete dedication to the school, the teacher must make the effort to exercise compassion and understanding when developing curriculum for Pacific Island demographic. More attention to this disconnect must be addressed in order to ensure that support can be given to students who struggle with these as times opposing and obligations. This can be done by viewing family priorities and emergencies as just as excusable in class as personal complications. Understanding this basic reality can help faculty develop curricular approaches and guidelines that provide flexibility to students who are trying to balance their many responsibilities and education and those throughout their personal lives. So as you can see, we want to portray the classroom not just as this place for academia or this place for scholars or a very professional, like closed space, but a fluid space that allows students to speak freely and to share whatever struggles they may have onto compassionate ears. If we look through all four of these, what we're seeing is not just the development of different ways in which we can engage students, but the overall change in environment for students. Looking at the classroom, not just as a place where you can go to learn, but also a place that encourages that learning, right? Not just a place where you hear from a sage on a stage, but a place where you can engage with professors and professionals in things that truly are important to you as a student and to you as a member of an island community. So in the Western classroom that we experience today, is one that's influenced by the working class experience of the industrial age. So students were placed in neat rows that simulated the conditions of a factory and attended schools for the amount of time that would mirror a typical workday, so they would be prepared to enter the working field upon graduation. And just as these environmental factors helped to shape the context of the typical Western education system, so too should we strive to allow the cultural environment of our islands shape the classrooms found around us. Pacific Island students face a number of challenges in their journey through higher education. There exists a constant tension within the very core of these students as they seek to excel in the realm of academia while still maintaining a firm foundation in their culture's beliefs and values. This leads to a multitude of problems that can be experienced by the student throughout their journey in academia and within their personal lives. Despite possessing the skills necessary and a deep desire to achieve greater self-advancement through the pursuit of advanced education, these students are put through an education system that is incompatible with their cultural values, creating obstacles that hinder their performance and ultimately causing many of them to cease their education altogether. While it's ultimately up to the student to reconcile these conflicting forces in their lives, teachers must realize their own agency in supporting this endeavor. It is through their pedagogical approaches that students can begin to see how their culture can still be relevant in the 21st century classroom. These four elements, appealing to the collectivist mindset, understanding the differences in cultural expression, connecting lessons to immediate surroundings, and identifying unique Pacific Islander priorities, help to fuse culture and the classroom. Understanding the reality that these students learn differently and applying smart changes to the course that take into account these relations allow for greater engagement to occur, further empowering an entire generation of young Indigenous scholars. So what we see is that through the implementation of island-centered pedagogy, we're not just allowing students to learn better, but we're encouraging them and showing them that their voices matter, that their opinions matter, and that there are ways in which they can apply their education that are outside of the normal Western expectation. This all in all helps to create this holistic learning environment um, that can have effects into the professional career as well. So upon sowing the seeds of this difference in environment in their educational career, we can expect to see that this can grow and we can bear the fruit of it as they extend into the professional careers as well. Okay. I'd like to end with a quote from Dr. Carlos Madrid, the Director of Research at MARC. And he actually gave this quote at the Marianas History Conference when he was the keynote speaker, I believe back in 2019. And he said, by bringing our own narratives of history in the public domain, we are actively constructing our sense of community and simultaneously presenting to the wide world the living voice of our generation. And I think it's so poignant because it really is to show that within the historiography that we have, it really is void of any local voice. And by creating a classroom and an environment where local voices are acknowledged and celebrated, we then begin to bring our own narratives of history into the world that we have. And so students can see that as they have always pulled from this body of knowledge throughout their career, they can finally find themselves contributing to the body of knowledge and furthering not only their personal fields, their personal fields, but also global fields as well, leaving their mark, their mark that is influenced and brought up and nurtured by their cultural background and experiences. So, this. Do we have any questions? That ends my presentation. Do we have any questions? You can go ahead and write it in on the chat, and we'll go ahead and read that if you have any. Okay, if there's no other questions, you can feel free to email me at elkanata98 at gmail.com if you would like.
Jesus Maasi Lazaro and Dr. Kirk Johnson for very poignant research that can help us navigate towards recovery, particularly in education.